think it's interesting, or it's probably one of the biggest challenges is to come to the judging scenario open, so that you're actually not looking for anything in particular except, well, for me, great work. And what is that? That can be a multitude of things. So I suppose in our first round of judging, that's where you are separating the wheat from the chaff, or those who are going to get closer to the final selection. So that was from, 1,000 plus entries down to, I think we got it down to 139 from memory. And that's really where you're making those sort of judgment calls as a group around what you think is a good or perhaps lesser work. Getting it down from the 139 down to the 30 exhibiting artists was much tougher, but we had the privilege of seeing the works in the flesh, so we were judging from the paintings themselves, and that makes an immeasurable difference because you're able to look at scale, technique, the composition in a very different way. I mean, works can tend to flatten out when you see them in reproduction, or sometimes they can actually be better when they're, you have the joys of a backlit computer screen. So seeing the works themselves was terrific. And I hope we didn't, I think that's why it's great to be part of a panel. We all come with our preconceptions, the kind of work that we gravitate to naturally. But being part of a panel, and if you're doing it openly, you should be willing to be tested by your fellow panellists, and to also be swayed. So there's no point coming to these things if you think you know the answer. And that was the great joy about the whole process. In terms of portraiture, it actually captures the essence of the subject in a way. I mean, we all know, I don't know Robert Forster personally, but it seemed to me, what I know of Robert Forster, it nailed it. But it's not a photographic likeness, not that there's anything wrong with, photorealism, but it captures a kind of feeling or sense of Robert Forster, and it does so technically in a really interesting way. He seems to kind of hover above the canvas. And when you look at the work quite closely, it's made up of his sort of multicoloured jacket, which in some ways is blocks of form, actually comes together with very minute brushstrokes of different colour. So technically it's really interesting. But as a portrait, it leaves you guessing. You instantly know who the subject is, but I think it makes you work. And in some ways, that's, to me, what makes an interesting painting and an interesting portrait. You don't want to just come to it and say, oh, yeah, there's Robert Forster, and walk away. And that work kept drawing us back. Well, portraiture is really interesting because we can think of it as being quite old-fashioned. But I think what you see when you come to this year's exhibition is that what makes a portrait, or what a successful portrait is, can be a multitude of things. And for me, and I hope for audiences who come to the exhibition, it also makes them think about what art and portraiture can contribute to contemporary life. These aren't photographs. There's something that's, and I'm a big fan of photography, but there's something about painted portraiture that still is relevant. And I hope when people look at the subjects, you're not only sort of going, oh yes, look, there's Sigrid Thornton or whoever it may be, but in some ways a good portrait captures the essence of the relationship between the painter and the sitter. It's a kind of intangible force that speaks of both in the work. And I think good painting should make us think about who we are, perhaps, where we're going and what we want to be, and a lot of the works in this year's prize do that.